We'll start up
Want
here.
to start over here? Yeah, or me just to burst in there and start?
No, I'll give you, for the video, I'll give you a little introduction. Thank you all for coming today. This is John Whitfield's Retrospective, and we're going to have a little gallery talk with his daughter, Susan Whitfield. This is Smoky Valley Arts and Folklife Center. If any of you aren't familiar with this space, I think we started, I always forget the number because I'm terrible with numbers, 5-6 years ago? 2020, and we've been in this space now for 4 years. We are a non-profit little art center that's entirely run by volunteers. We don't have any paid staff. We have workshops and gallery talks, monthly exhibitions for now. Upcoming, we have the holiday season with our Christmas crafts and cocktails every Thursday evening, starting after Thanksgiving, I believe. And then our next upcoming exhibition, we've rearranged our schedule a little bit, is Hartung's exhibition. It's opening next weekend on Friday, the first weekend in September. Then we will have the Swedish folk costume exhibition, a holiday gift exhibition through November and December, and then a workshops exhibition in January. So we hope to see you maybe all out for many of those exhibitions and workshops. I'll hand the microphone over to Susan now, and we'll hear about John. And you can do the announcements next time if you'd like to add more, or I can pass the mic to you.
Marcia, did you want to talk?
I just want to mention that Hartung is going to give 2 talks on his exhibition, and one of them is a week from today.
Oh, yes. Check out our website and Facebook to see the poster of the dates of Hartung's 2 talks that he's going to give, and we will for sure Facebook Live one of those talks, hopefully both of them. So we'll see. Thank you very much.
Turn this off.
Oh, do you want it pinned or do you want it?
What works best?
Pinning's nice, then you don't have to hold
And I don't worry about waving it around.
it. And I hope everyone can hear us.
Can people hear me?
Yes.
Can you all hear me? I can usually shout loud enough to get everybody if this isn't working. Okay. First of all, I want to thank Marcia and members of the board and all the volunteers for making this possible. I wasn't really sure about what this was going to be like, but it's been a wonderful experience for me. And so I really am grateful for that and all of the help in hanging the show, and Brad gets a thanks in that too, wherever Brad wandered off to. So thank you, everybody. There, I saw the hat. Okay. So I am going to try to not talk forever, but as people who know me know, I sometimes just drone on and on. And if you all are struggling with that, let me know, and I'll try to line it up. But I thought, I'm trying to organize, what am I going to say to people? Because I'm not the artist, I'm just the daughter. And I decided I would try to focus around 3 questions that 2 of them I have been asked for more than 60 years. And one of them I was only asked recently, and I'll tell you what they are. But I'm going to focus my comments about the pieces and my dad's work life around these 2. The first question that I was always asked from the time I was a small child is, does your father make a living? The second one was, people would point to any particular piece and say, how long did it take to make that? Those were the 2 most common questions, and I'm going to make it a little more interesting than it might sound. And the third question I was asked just a few weeks ago, and that was to describe what I thought my dad's legacy was, how I would describe it. And I really didn't have a good idea. Marcia saw me trying to figure it out. My dad never talked about it with me, but I'm going to give you some ideas about what I think he would have liked it to be. And that will be when I will wind up my remarks. So, for those who didn't know my dad, he was born in December 1927 in India to a British father and an American mother. My grandfather was running a training school, which was like a vo-tech school, where very low caste Indian boys could go and learn a skill or a trade, because otherwise they wouldn't have any opportunity to earn a living. They would be generally begging for survival. So as a very little boy, my dad must have been allowed to roam around this school, because he would tell me frequently how much he was impressed as a child with watching people make things. And he thinks that got him started with wanting to be a maker, with wanting to be a sculptor. When he was a little older, he went to a boarding school in the Himalayas, and it must have been an incredibly lush, beautiful setting, because he talked about the birds, the beautiful plants, the flowers, just the incredible wildlife around. And so that was his life until he was about 12 or 13 years old. The family was on furlough in visiting family in Great Britain and in America, and World War II started in Europe. So my grandfather was called back to the British Army. My grandmother took the children and came back to America. My Aunt Margaret, my dad's older sister, his only female sibling, had a scholarship to study art with Sanson here in Bethany. And so my grandmother moved my aunt and her two younger boys to Lindsborg. So Lindsborg was really the first place in America that my dad lived that he felt comfortable. He was a little British boy, and he wore short pants, and he got teased and beat up by kids, not in Lindsborg, other places. And he just was counting the days till he could go back to India. So my aunt decided to transfer to KU. My grandmother moved the two little boys to Topeka. They weren't so little, they were in high school then. My dad went to Topeka High, graduated from Topeka High, married my mother, whom we met in Topeka High, in 1947. And then that got him started going into the work world. He had 1 year of college at a very fundamentalist, small church school. He wasn't happy there. So my mother had quite a job to persuade him to go back to school. So he finally agreed, and he took a part-time job, and she went full-time to work, and he went to Washburn University. He thought he wanted to be a writer. He took a couple of art classes, and that was it. That did it for him. So from that point on, he was determined to be an artist. So he was a little older student. He was in his, 47, they were married. He was probably close to 30 before he went back to school. So he graduated from Washburn University in 1963, and he thought about getting an MFA, but he decided he'd better get to work because he needed to make a living. So it was very practical, and he started out by primarily doing a lot of commissions that were liturgical in nature for churches and for religious organizations. So he did a lot of altar pieces, altar crosses, baptismal fonts, Stations of the Cross, everything you can think of that they need as tools in the church for worship. He also started doing some incredible large concrete panels that would be carved. And these were not just religious things. They were generally depicting nature, depicting creativity, depicting something from the natural world. And a number of those are in Topeka too, are still at a church that has not changed hands, and it's near downtown. I can't give you the exact address. But that was probably when he really started doing what we think of as sculpting. So about 1964, my parents found a property out west of Topeka in the county, and it had a separate building from the house. It was a studio. So they moved there in November of '64, and he was, of course, already establishing himself as an artist in the liturgical area. But then he was able to expand. And so from that time on, from mid-'60s to the end of the '60s, he was not only taking these commissions, he was creating a number of smaller pieces, things that you would see here, mainly metal pieces. did lots of pieces that he called rock plants, and I have many of these different sizes. This is one of the larger of the small ones, but he had some that were probably about as tall as I am. He did just a great many types of sculpture. Not so much abstract at that point, more realistic, naturalistic kinds of work. But so he was doing that. He was selling his work at art fairs, traveling around to, he went to Oklahoma quite a bit, Wichita, the art fair in Plaza, Kansas City, Topeka. I think he went to Nebraska, and I think also in St. Louis a few times. So he was creating work for those pieces. He was selling through galleries in Kansas City, Wichita, Topeka, I think one in Oklahoma, but it's been a long, long time ago for me to remember that. So he was creating this work, and it was often on consignment. And these were pieces that he wanted to make, but the pieces that he thought would have public appeal for people who were looking for art. So he was trying to be very practical because he wanted a needed to make money. He was teaching. He taught at Washburn University a couple of courses, jewelry, and I don't know whether they called the other one metalworking or sculpture, but he taught there for a number of years. He taught workshops and short-term classes for some of the arts organizations in Topeka. One that I remember, and this was more of a fun class, was creating cookie cutters, and I have a really beautiful, fun bird that he created as a model for one of those classes. So you can see he did a wide range of art-related work. Let's see, so we had the art fairs, we had the galleries. He also had this studio in the country that was big enough to develop a gallery. And so he would sell work through that gallery. And at the same time, he was getting more and more commissions from individuals, from businesses, organizations that wanted something to commemorate or celebrate a person, an event. Many of the businesses at that point in time were starting to develop art collections, and so he had a lot of pieces that were purchased to add to the art collection in that business at that time. So those were things that he was doing, and he also was beginning to get bigger commissions. Now, very few of these were competitions. You've probably seen a lot of public art commissions result from a competition, but his were all, I think, generally privately funded, and people would come to him and they would want a piece of work. So the process was relatively complicated. He would do some research. He often would go and interview the people involved. So for instance, we have a piece over here that is called the Vital Balance. And this was a piece that was designed and created, excuse me, Emily, to honor Dr. Carl Mann. So he spent a couple of months interviewing people, including Dr. Carl and some of Dr. Carl's associates. He read Dr. Carl's book that is entitled The Vital Balance, and it's not a fun book to read, I'll tell you. Then he came up with a design. He built the model, and then he takes the design and the proposal back to the family, and they decided they wanted to go ahead with it. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the process of building these pieces, and this would be similar process to everything, whether it was a smaller piece of sculpture like that rock plant or the larger pieces. And over here there are a few models of large pieces that he created. It's amazing I have these because generally the models ended up going to the people who asked for the commission. So I feel very fortunate, although I do believe there is a second model of this one that did go to the foundation. So after he gets the commission, then he has to convert the model to a larger piece. Now this piece, as I recall, is 21 feet. So there's quite a lot of math and calculation involved so that you can keep the same proportions. This was before we had computers, and I don't think my dad would have touched a computer if he'd had one. But, so he spent a lot of time developing the right proportions. He would build a pattern. For smaller pieces, it was sometimes just brown paper. But I think for this one, he did have it was thin metal, and it was probably aluminum, or it was sheet steel. So everything starts off as sheet metal. Nothing in the way of his sculptures was ever cast in a foundry. It was all fabricated from sheet metal. So he's got the pattern, he lays that out on the copper, and I don't know if anybody has ever had the privilege to see big sheets of copper when they've been just produced. They are some of the most beautiful pieces of metal you will ever see. Just the color is rich and it is gorgeous. So I remember many times the delivery truck coming to the studio, and they would unload sheet after sheet after sheet of the sheet metal. So he takes the sheet metal, he lays out his patterns, and then he proceeds to cut the different pattern pieces, realizing that for most of these, there are at least 4 pieces of flat metal that he cuts, that he creates out of the sheet. He didn't have a laser cutter. All these were cut with very heavy metal shears. The next stage, usually once he got those pieces cut, was then to fabricate them into the 4-sided pieces. I think these are all 4-sided that we have here. And so then he would have the individual pieces. Then it was necessary to build scaffolding and a support structure, because working on this piece, you had to have it standing upright. So that involved, for whatever piece it was, for this one it was quite a large set of scaffolds and the structural support. One of the photos I have of him in one of those binders is him standing and actually looking pretty happy under that. And he also used a set of tripods, which I remember well because I often got to, I'm much stronger than I look, but I often was the person who was helping to lift these metal pieces up into position. And then once, because these had already been all welded together with a torch, this wasn't an arc welding, he then would get up on the scaffolding and he proceeded to lay the bronze coating over the copper. And that involved, again, a torch and lots of bronze rod. So it was hard work, physically hard work. He was always doing these things in the middle of the horrible hot summer. And I was typical unpleasant young woman who didn't like to sweat or get dirty. And so as a prime helper, I was always getting dirty and sweaty. So I wasn't that excited to be a helper. I would be thrilled now, but at any rate, so once the piece was had been totally covered, then he would need to attach the anchor rod. So this particular piece was sunk into basically a hole dug in the ground, and it was filled with concrete. But we had to have appropriate structural supports so that it would not fall over. It would not have any effect from wind or heavy forbid a bunch of kids deciding to climb on it. It wasn't in a really secure place, but if you were on the foundation grounds, you would see it like in a clock tower building. So those were always interesting days when he was getting that structure there. So then what happened is it was loaded on flatbed truck, it was all to the site. The cement trucks come, and he didn't have a crew because the piece is all one piece. I don't remember how much he weighed, but he had to have a crew. Take it off the truck, set it upright, had to take some of the scaffolding with us to have that done. The concrete trucks come, and then it's another hot, miserable, nasty day. But that's the process for creating a piece like this. This particular piece probably took him 8 months between the time he started on the design and the time it was finished and when it was on site. different, because the smaller pieces would have taken just a few days, many pieces. Like this rock plant, for instance. He loved rocks. We used to go to Colorado when I was a kid, and he used to go all around Kansas. He was always going to the stream beds, buying interesting rocks, and so we would always have rocks coming back with us from Colorado camping trips. And so he would keep these for a while, and then find one, and he would create the rock plant, and it would be perfect for that. So, but this piece would have started as a flat sheet, and there would be some tubes in this one. Some would have rolled himself, some would have been rods that we purchased, and the little ladybug on here would have been created from flat sheet. We would have used jewelry tools to hammer it, use the buff to polish it. So it did take a lot of time, but that would be a few hours compared to that piece. And I had no idea how much design time he spent. He would have bouts of working with this kind of book and creating designs that he wanted to make. So it was probably a much more, not a machine type process, but more organized and just designing one piece at a time and then creating it. So that's somewhat mixed description of the kinds of pieces that he was creating. Now, I'm going to go back in time a little bit because, I was talking about the late 60s and into the 70s. And that was before he had created this piece or any of the, except a figure of Christ. That was created in the late 60s for a press school in Connecticut. But the other pieces that are bigger pieces, those were all created in the period of time after about 1976. But in 1972, in July, he had a heart attack. And this was just at the peak when he was very, very prolific, producing a lot of artwork. Had all these galleries selling his work, the art fairs, the studio gallery, the teaching, and the commissions. So he was, this was before we had cardiologists in the Topeka hospitals. There was no intervention. There was no bypass surgery. There was nothing to be done. He was in ICU and he either survived or he didn't. They sent him back. He had a massive coronary enlargement. At that point in time, the doctor said, "You are totally disabled. You just go home. Just enjoy what's left of your life." I'm not sure they told my father as bluntly as they told myself and my mother that they didn't give him 5 years. He would be gone. My dad was not about to accept this, and people who knew my dad can appreciate that. There was no cardiac leave. So he got out of the hospital, it was probably sometime in September, and he decided he would build himself back up, and he did. It was pretty amazing, and it's just a testament to his incredible self-discipline, because the way he started it was going on the paved road that ran in front of their property, and it was a hilly road. If any of you know Topeka, you know there are a lot of hills around, and their road had, I don't know how many, it was long, it was a hot, miserable road. I went with him many times on these initial walks, and he built up to going 3 or 4 miles a day. And this is somebody whose left ventricle was essentially not functioning. So it was after that experience that he created all these large pieces of work. So that's amazing testament to his fortitude, his determination, his refusal to accept that he couldn't do something. So he was back working pretty hard by about 1973, certainly into 74, and that's when all of this happened. So we get into the early 80s. He is still working at this pace. He wasn't going to art fairs anymore, but he was still selling a lot of work. And he did start to make a few wind vanes at that time, but he really wasn't into the wind vanes much until he came to Lindsborg. He was tired. He wanted to move to Lindsborg for a number of reasons. My mother was not interested. But he finally persuaded her, and so in about 1984, I think it was, they bought this Washington Street, one of the first houses built in Lindsborg in 1880, and it was a pitiful house. I looked at it and I thought, oh, this is awful. It didn't have a kitchen. It didn't have anything proper in it. And those of you who remember Ernie Allen was there. He was renting it. But my dad and my mom would drive out almost every weekend, and they worked on that house. And finally, by about 1985, I think in the fall, they always liked to move in fall, in November, when the weather was bad for some reason. But they moved in, and I have a lot of great pictures of them doing various things in that house. But it was plaster walls, it was all that stuff from the old days. So he worked on that full-time for about the rest of 85 and into 86. He had a new studio built on the property, and so he was gradually getting back into work in the studio, and he was enjoying it. And I think that probably the years he was here, especially when he was creating the wind vanes, when he was doing a lot of smaller sculptures that were displayed and sold at two galleries here in Lindsborg, the Forsberg's Courtyard Gallery and the Applequist Prairie Woods Gallery. I think he had more fun with his art in those years. He wasn't taking those big commissions, no art fairs, no other galleries, just removed a lot of the pressure. And I think he was probably at his happiest. And that's when he did some of the most fun pieces. I was reading last night some comments that somebody had shared with me about one of the pieces that he made, and I was remembering it, and it was called the flag waving machine. And it was like a Rube Goldberg type machine, powered by mice, and the mice would be powering it, and then they would be waving flags. And he was, he had some political comments about it, but he had a lot of fun. So he did that kind of thing. The wind vanes, he did accept commissions for those. I think the biggest piece he did in the way of a wind vane is about 7, 8 feet across, and it's about 5 feet high. It's a huge Scandinavian bird. It's on a pole on a ranch in Nebraska. The other pieces that were larger were on the first bank here and the courtyard building. But the rest of them were smaller, like some of the pieces that we have here for you to see. He really loved those. He used, in the early days, a lot of this hand-made European glass that they had used to create stained glass windows. Like, there's a photo of a chapel where he had designed and created a glass window. And that's a nighttime photograph that's taken. So he just enjoyed the color, he enjoyed using different materials and being a little bit humorous with some of the things he did. I'm not going to talk a lot about the Lindsborg pieces because Marcia has kindly produced a little brochure about the pieces here that you can see public. There are more wind vanes, as I didn't mention there, but he loved Lindsborg. He was really happy here. As happy as my dad probably could be anywhere. I think he was always a little restless, but this was a place he was happy to live. So that's going to get me to the question I was asked about his legacy. And I think he would have been uncomfortable with the idea of a legacy, probably because he was raised by people who actively, and I'm sure it was well-intentioned, encouraged their children from thinking well of themselves. All my father's siblings had a hard time with this. It was prideful, and you just were not to think well of yourself at all. So legacy, he would have had a hard time. But I think he might have liked the legacy to be, thank you, Marcia, to be something along the lines of some of our discussions, which we had, about life and the purpose of being here, what we're supposed to do as humans. And he said he thought that one of the things that was really important to him was he was in such awe, such of the beauty of nature, of the natural world, of the mechanical intricacies, and he had wanted to share that awe, that appreciation with people, and he did that through his work. I think he also strongly believed, and he talked about this a lot, that we are all connected, And I don't know about you, but there are some people in the world I wouldn't want to be connected. But, you know, we were all connected. And so I think he just wanted to share that joy in being alive and to make sure that people were looking and were thinking and aware of the intricacy of nature especially. He loved to teach, he loved to cook bread, bake bread, he loved to spend time with his students, with friends, with people who came to the studio. It was really a very good life now that I look back on it. And there were ups and downs, and yes, he did make a living. He did not become a millionaire, but he did make a living, and I think he was happy, and he would have been thrilled to see you all here if he hadn't been too embarrassed. But people were still interested in his work. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be around for a while.
Can you tell us a little bit the background of building the chapel?
Oh, the chapel.
Why the chapel?
Well, he built a meditation chapel, and right now it's not open. He had it open to people, and my mom, after he passed, did not want it open. I may get it open again someday. But the chapel, he was really intrigued by the Norwegian state churches. I was spending a lot of time in Wisconsin, and he came up there one time when I was there. We went to a place called Bachelor of Fine Arts. I don't know if anybody's been there. It's an amazing place. If you know the Door County area, and this wonderful chapel building, it is an amazing chapel. But that gave him an idea. And so when he came back, he did a little research about various chapels, and especially the Norwegian churches. And he, because my father had a lot of Norwegian blood, I don't know that he shared that with people in Lindsborg, because I know there's this problem between Swedes and Norwegians. But so he designed this chapel. It was put together. It's corrugated metal with a lot of found items and a lot of things that had some significance to Lindsborg. For instance, there's a piece from the old, I think it was the old main building, right? It's the threshold when you come in the door. The doors on the inside are carved. There were a lot of carvings inside. There are some, he used some beautiful blue wine glass bottles set into a window, just because he loved the art of it. And there are tiles on one of the ledges in there that work as candles. He used to have some incense, he had a guest book, he would come write things, but he meant it just to be a place of meditation. Some people were very unhappy because they thought it was sacrilegious, it was a chapel. But he enjoyed it, he used it a lot, and he just wanted to share it with anybody who was interested. So is there anything else particular? If we could open it again someday. I'm periodically. I was hoping maybe for Helen's guest I could open it up, but I need to use it for the wind banging on the top is not over by a hot wind range, and I'm having a devil of a time getting that. I think, however, Marcia and Brad know somebody who's going to help me get that wind banging. I'm also traveling. It's too high to really fly, although I didn't get the ladder out to do it, but nobody wants me to do it. So it's something big. Other than that, there's so much more to tell you, but everybody's done a superb job of staying away. Just ask me if you have any questions, otherwise that's all I'm going to say.
Well, hey, I think you did a beautiful job of presenting this work. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, there's a lot of offspring that they don't give a shit. They just want to sell it to get rid of it.
That's hard for me. I have probably twice this much, and I have some amazing, beautiful pieces that I'm just too selfish to share.
Yeah.
I'm now trying to figure out how to dispose of things. That's my next challenge, but I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah. It's really a nice show, and you did good.
Thank you.
You know.
Now, there's
Thank
my-
you,
Yeah.
Susan.
Thank you.
There's lots of snacks in the back room, so please help yourself.
This is such a cool show. This is one of the neatest shows.
Thank you.
He had such a wide variety of what he did, what he liked, and what he used.
And you can bring the food into the gallery space. Don't feel like you have to stay back there. Sorry, David.
Oh, you're good. I'm not trying to interrupt you.
Is this video going to be on Facebook?
It is right here. Yeah,
Right?
yes.
I know Robin will, I took some pictures, but she'll really want to see.
Okay. Bye, Sandy.
Hi, stuff she has to and I still don't remember if he gave it to Walden or Walden. They had a joke between the two.
That's funny.
Now that it's cooler, I don't mind. We're for a while.
Anyway, I thought I would. We'll try and let her out.
Yeah, I've got family coming for Helling's Fest, so I know it'll be a zoo.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like there's good fun.
We should, cross the board and South. Good seeing you.
Thank you for watching. This concludes the virtual tour.